Good morning. We continue our journey in Hemshech Samach Vav, and we are on page 33. We finished the paragraph on page 33. What did we learn in the last class? Continuing the discussion after establishing that Seder Hishtalsos, which really means existence, the cosmic order, referring to the entire structure and infrastructure of existence from the highest levels, post-tzimtzum, I should add, is defined by midah gvul. And the kav is the main force, the main artery, the main energy that the divine uses to create existence. The kav amida, it measures every aspect and defines and shapes the parameters of every world and every sphere. As we described, he went all the way from the highest levels of Reshis HaKav right after the tzimtzum. Because it comes after the tzimtzum, so even though it's light, it is kav ohr. It's not a keli, it's ohr. Kelim for sure are structured, but the ohr of the kav, because it's post tzimtzum, the tzimtzum causes it to be a focused and a focused and channeled form of energy. That's the chol tichla re'isi kates. As he began on page 28, the chol tichla re'isi kates. For every end, I see a beginning, the different interpretations. He brought all the different commentaries, which we're going to now conclude in this today's class. In contrast to that, we have Rechava Mitzvos Sechem Ha'od, that the mitzvahs are very expansive. Though he did not use that verse yet, he's going to use it again. We're going to learn it today. But he did introduce what is the contrast to midah v'gvul of the kav, and that's the Ohr Ein Sof before the tzimtzum. Before the tzimtzum doesn't have this; it's not subject to any of these limitations. That's why it's called Ohr Ein Sof. Like he said there, if you bottom of page 30 is there. It's mamala kol makom achol mereisha v'ad sefer b'shava. It feels like we said. It's all pervasive, all omnipresent. Fills everything equally. Now, do we have experiences of that Ohr Ein Sof lifnei tzimtzum? So absolutely. We experience, first of all, the osad love in the future. After all the avodah, after all our work, we will reach the level. That level of Gilei Elokus, Ohr Ein Sof, will be here down below, as he brought many verses to attest to that on page 31. We already discussed it earlier as well in the first mimer and a few other places earlier in Samach Vav. And then, Bizman Hazeh, we also have experiences of it. Beis HaMikdash, and every Shabbos is me'ein. Every Shabbos is me'ein, Yom Shekulei Shabbos, or Menucha L'chai Elamim. Has that element of accessing a level that is pre-tzimtzum, where the tzimtzumim rest, as he put it, shvisas ha-tzimtzumim. And then, bottom of page 31, as we learned in the previous class, v'chein hamshacha sh'ayideh Torah. So now, through the hamshacha, through Torah accesses Ohr Ein Sof lifnei tzimtzum, gili Ohr Ein Sof lamata, mishum desheresh hamshacha Ohr Ein Sof shelifnei tzimtzum. Like he said, vayhi kel ma'al l'rakia, and the interpretation is that the voice of the Torah, the sound of the Torah, is higher than the rakia, higher than the mafsik, than the partition that separates, which is rooted in the tzimtzum harishon. So Torah too is a expression, a manifestation of Ohr Ein Sof lifnei tzimtzum, unlike the kav that creates existence. In other words, the divine energy that creates existence is structured. Torah introduces another track of energy that is not subject to the kav, that has its own connection to Ohr Ein Sof lifnei tzimtzum, and is not subject to the tzimtzumim, the diminishments and the gradations that the kav is, which is necessary to create the structure of existence. So Torah introduces a higher level of divine energy. In the long parentheses, he clarified, he qualified and explained that though the Torah was given dafka lamata, so you say lamaila like lamata, the fact that Torah was given dafka lamata, he says, but that's referring to the shadish of Torah, the way it's rooted in atzmus mamish. And that was given dafka lamata to neshamas begufim, just as, because that's the ultimate purpose. And he goes on to explain that, and that will be revealed in the future. Shashuya melech batzmusei, yeah, the Torah, like ayin lo irasa. Me'ein zeh, he said, is also by tzaddikim when they learn Torah, elam chatira b'chayecha, but the giluya eres of Torah. When you're talking about the giluyim of Torah, not the way it's rooted in atzmus, it's in all the worlds. The Torah in all the worlds, in Elam Atzilus, in Elam Izbiyah, and even the Malachim get it through the Neshamas. And regardless, however you explain this idea, and really is bringing 2 points here, however you explain Torah Lamata, either way, whether you're talking about the Etzem of Torah is Dafka Lamata, or you're talking about the Giluyim of Torah, even the Giluyim of Torah, he said clearly, it's not like the Kav. So when you say Masha Ikra Torah Lamata Dafka, it's not because the Torah is limited. You say the Torah is given dafka below, so you could say, you know what, that shows the Torah is a limited Torah because it has to come down into a limited world. He says, no, that's not the case. It's because if it was subject to that hierarchy, then the Ikra Torah would be Lamaila, like it is with the Kav. The Ikra of the Kav is above, not below. As it goes downward, it gets diminished. The fact that the Torah is given below, however you explain it, is definitely not as a result of midah v'gvul. So either way, the Torah remains something that retains its Ein Sof, its bli gvul nature. Inyan Achi, he says, it's not the maimer of Kavamida, and that's why Talmidei Chachamim are not affected by the fire of Gehenim, and a few other Maimorei Chazal that he brought. Ben Chayden, someone who learns Torah, is a free person, and he brought also the Shechina Shruya Beinayim when you learn Torah, and Hashem finds that in his Daled Amos Shalalacha, that's where the Shechina is found. All this showing that Torah has a unique expression of the divine that is not there in existence on its own. And that's because the Giluyim Shebe'elim is Eshlam Midah V'Gvul. They're measured, they have a beginning and end, they're finite, because they come after the tzimtzum. Whereas the Torah is a different track, as I just explained. Then the final paragraph that we learned goes back now to the beginning of the whole point. Remember, when he started this L'chol Tichler Isi Kates, he called it a Bira Inyan, that will understand this Inyan by first understanding L'chol Tichler Isi Kates. But what was he discussing before? He was talking about the comparison of 2 types of tracks. One track, ad v'ad b'chlal, and one is ad v'loy ad b'chlal. That's how it began in the beginning of the Maimer. When you go back to the pages 25 and 26. So what did he explain? And now he sums that up and reviews it yet again with more detail. He says, based on that, now we can understand these 2 levels. The Chol Tichler Isi Kates is ad v'ad b'chlal. Why? Because there the levels are commensurate to each other. Like he says, the Gilim Maseidah Shtalsh is ad v'ad b'chlal. They're be'erech zelazeh, commensurate to each other. And one level leads you to the next. So it's ad v'ad b'chlal. As you climb, one level leads you into the next level. Like we spoke, rungs of a ladder, steps, staircase, steps. One level leads you to the next. And it's both connected to the level above and the level below. And that's all connected to yes, ketz v'seif, because everything has a finite chol tichler isi kates. And he brings the Rashi that interprets it, that even if you can't see the end of, let's say, the earth, when you stand, but nevertheless, you can envision, you can understand that the earth is a finite entity. So even if you haven't reached it, we understand that it has a finite structure. But the Eire Shalamayla Mishtalshlus, there is ad v'loy ad b'chlal, because now you're talking about bli gvul, and in bli gvul, one level does not necessarily lead you to the next level because they're not commensurate to each other. There you can't say, I can envision the end, because there is no end. It goes on and on and on, as we learned. So therefore, though he could have a comprehension of the level that he's at, that does not necessarily lead him into the next level of comprehension, unless he has a bittul, like he explains, where you suspend and you would divest yourself of the lower level of understanding in order to absorb the higher level. In addition to the fact that the higher level is actually a more abstract and a more sublime understanding. But bottom line is, the higher you go, the more you respect and recognize what he called the haflah, the awesome wonder of that which is higher than you. So it's the exact opposite. It's not what one idea leads you to the next idea, which is the way it is in all education as we climb from level to level in the world of midah v'gvul, of measure. Here has a different type of experience altogether. And that's ad v'lo yad b'chlal. And that's through the bittul from one level to the next level. So here, l'chein b'bchinas madrigazu ein shaykh lemer re'isi kates. So here you can't say re'isi kates, l'chol tichler re'isi kates, because you can't see or envision an end, because there is no end. Ma'achar sha'ad v'lo yad b'chlal, because you could go till here, but not beyond that. Beyond that is a different type of experience that requires a bittul. So your previous experience cannot help you envision the next level of experience. You need to divest yourself, suspend, strip yourself of a previous level to get to that level. And that's where we stopped. So we're 5 lines from the bottom of the paragraph on page 33. And now he's going to take us back to 2 interpretations that he brought in L'chol Tichler Isi Kates. One is Rashi and one is the Even Ezra. You may recall that when he spoke about Rashi, he was wondering, what does Rashi mean? And we finally came to understand it from the Rashi and Gemara and Eruvin, as he brought. So Rashi says, L'chol siyam dover yesh kates v'gvul. Everything that ends has a kates v'gvul. And he asked L'cheda, that seems like just redundancy. But then when you look in the Gemara and Eruvin, he explains it further by saying, that that wherever you are in a finite reality, you can envision that there's an end to it. And he brought that the Mitzvos David interprets it similarly. So you can envision a ketz. But then he brought another commentary, the Even Ezra. And now the Rebbe Rashab is going to refer to these 2. So let's read it inside, and I'll go back to those commentaries. We'll understand the distinction. Not that they don't disagree, it's just different interpretations, different emphasis, I would say, in this meaning of l'chol tichler isi kates. So 5 lines from the bottom of the paragraph, the next to last paragraph, page 33. Pages can be found at samachvav.com. So he says, El shazeu lepirush Rashi, bepirush isi kates. This that we just said is according to Rashi. Rashi says that since it's a finite entity, so l'chol tichla, everything that has a finite entity, I can see, envision an end. That's what we just explained. That's ad va'ad b'chlal. That in the finite structure of Ishtalshlus, every level leads you to the next level. And every level, wherever you are, you can envision, because it's still all in the finite domain, the edges, so to speak, of that reality. But the Even Ezra, to read the language of the Even Ezra, before we read on, he writes, L'chol tichla, kates b'lashenenu. In our language, when we use the word kates, sometimes it means the head, sometimes it means the end. It could be this edge or that edge. When you say kates, does it mean the beginning or the end? Does it mean the reish or the seif? So it says pam reish, pam seif. Like we say shnei seisav. When 2 edges, like 2 bookends, two edges. Each one we call the kates. So according to that, the Ibn Ezra is adding another kvetch, so to speak, another emphasis here in this verse, L'chol tichla isi kates. So even though tichla is kates, but being that the end and the beginning are both called kates, so the kavanah is that everything that has a beginning has an end. And everything that has an end has a beginning. So the Rebbe Rashab pre-tzimtzum is going to explain what is the Ibn Ezra adding, so to speak, to Rashi. So he says like this now, continuing back on page 33. Ulapidash Ibn Ezra Harab Avram ben Azariah. According to the Ibn Ezra, Imre l'chol tichla isi kates. Let me just say, I want to just see the language. That by saying l'chol tichla isi hainu, that means that geluyim de seder shtalshlus, that the revelations of the cosmic order, of the structure of existence, shein b'bchinas midav v'gvul. So he's talking about the geluyim of seder which are measured and finite. The isi kates, that in these giluyim I see the other edge. Shehein ayidei tzimtzum dafke. That's through the tzimtzum dafke. In other words, according to Rashi, he's just saying that when you're in a finite reality, you know that there is, even if you can't see it with your eyes, your mind can envision that there is an end. But it doesn't tell you anything about the end. Here, the Rebbe Ezra is saying that l'chol tichla isi kates is because kates can mean both edges. So one in the edge indicates on the other edge. So what he's saying is that means that it's ayidei tzimtzum dafke, because dafke through the tzimtzum that creates the possibility for this finite structure, for there to be a beginning and an end. That seems to me what he's saying here. It's not 100% clear, to be honest, because at the end of the day they're both talking about a finite reality. But clearly he's saying that with he says, Ela shazel lepirush. And Ibn Ezra seems to add something. What is the Ibn Ezra adding is that the word kates can be used in both directions. Why? Because the fact that there's an end to the kav, and there's gradations all the way to the lowest level, which means there is a conclusion to the Ohr that comes into Seder Shtalshlus. All of it right away tells you that there's the other end. It's all because there's a tzimtzum at the beginning of the process. So it's not just telling you that every end has a beginning, it's also telling you that the root of it is the tzimtzum. That's what it sounds like he's saying. If someone has a better interpretation, by all means. It's very, very bekitzer here, but that's what it looks like he's saying. Well, let's conclude this paragraph, and then I'll stop for any questions or comments. And according to this, tzarich lefarish, or tzarich lemer, tzarich lefarish, I see they write below in the footnote. According to this, now we can understand the second half of the verse. What does the second half of the verse says? Rechava mitzvosechem ha'oid. By contrast, till now we've been talking about the finite reality. And that is all has a beginning and an end, and is rooted in the tzimtzum and so on. Now, according to that, when it says "Ulefi zeh," now does he mean "Lefi zeh" the Ibn Ezra, or does he mean Rashi, or does he mean both? I would say he means both, because he doesn't really make fundamental distinction between them. But that's also something that can be discussed. So, according to this, when it says "Rechava meshakasav rechava mitzvosechem ha'ed," you have to interpret that means hainu. That means shehem b'chinas eresh shalamayla mishtalshlus. The b'chinas bligvul. Then now you're talking about the eres that are higher than ishtalshlus in a state of bligvul. Ve'ein behem b'chinas tchila v'sof. And they indeed do not have a beginning and an end. Because when you read Rechava mitzvosechem ha'ed, you could still say it's very expansive, but it doesn't say that it doesn't have a beginning or end. But once you understand the commentaries on the Chol Tichur Isi case, and especially Apichsidis, that it's referring to the finite reality of existence, so then Rechava mitzvosechem ha'ed means it's a different track. It comes from a different reality. It's a reality that's bligvul, higher than ishtalshlus, means higher than the tzimtzum. Shezeu agili mebchinas Ohr Ein Sof shalifnei tzimtzum. That's a gili from Ohr Ein Sof pre-tzimtzum. Now, technically, you could say this is a follow-up to the Even Ezra, if we could understand what the Even Ezra is adding to Rashi. Because by the Even Ezra, he brings the tzimtzum. By Rashi, he just brings the idea of beginning and end and a finite existence. So I still need to look into this a bit more to understand. I wanted to look in the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer. There's a Maimer that may explain this further. But that's as far as I understand it right now. So here we have the end of this topic of these two different realities. The Chol Tichur Isi Kates is the finite reality. Then there's the infinite reality of Ohr Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum, which manifests in the Mitzvos. And that, of course, consistent with what we learned before about Torah. The Torah is also from that level, and Shabbos and Beis Hamikdash, and of course the Asur Lavi will be in full glory, this revelation from before the Tzimtzum. As I said, I'm open to other explanations in what he's saying about the Even Ezra and Rashi. Especially, he uses the word Aval, Elo, Shazel Lepirush Rashi, Elo. It's a type of qualification. Elo, but it's like a but. Question is, what is that but really? So I tried to explain it, but again, it needs, I think, more explanation even than what I gave. But let me stop here right now for any questions or any comments. Okay.
I'm wondering why.
I'm here. I'm just bringing a sefer. I want to see another sefer here.
Can I ask a question? Or should I wait?
No, you go ahead. I'm listening. I'm right here.
I'm wondering why the Rebbe Rashab is relying so heavily on these two Perushim as if to justify the Kabbalah and the Chassidus that follows. It seems like he's working really, really hard to use these sources to say that we essentially have two perspectives on reality. One is a finite world, which is after the tzimtzum, and we have a world that is infinite or doesn't have a clear beginning or end, and which is the bleak or lifnei tzimtzum, bleak bowl. We have we have a finite and infinite, and
yeah, I understand. The answer is very straightforward. Chassidus Pnimis HaTorah is based on Nigla the Torah, based on the Psukim. Everything is grounded in verses, and he brings a verse as the grounding of all of these ideas. So even though these ideas are discussed in Kabbalah and Chassidus, but when you ground it in verses, it gives it the whole full flavor of it. Like you'll find many, many places in Chassidus, it talks about a concept, but you'll always see it's based on a verse, or a source in a verse, or a remez. For example, many examples I can give. I mean, there's unlimited examples. This is common, this is a Gemara also. Menaha Nemila, the Amakra. The Gemara will make a statement, and then it'll say, how do we know that? So it'll say, here's what the Pasuk says.
Yeah, no,
so,
I understand.
At a very basic level, he's bringing the Psukim that are the sources of these ideas, and by going through the commentaries, you get a full understanding what these verses mean, and then the verse comes alive in the full sense with the chassidus of it.
Well, I certainly understand that sort of, let's call it Talmudic approach to making a proof.
No, this is Torah approach. This is a rule in Torah. You always ground everything in the pasuk.
All right, so a Torah approach, not Talmudic, but that's demonstrated in, like you just said, in the Talmudic pilpul. But it just seems like there are plenty of other sources to not justify, to explain.
Well, if you can cite one, we can discuss why he's not bringing it, or does he bring it elsewhere? By all means, if you have a source, tell me a source where you have a contrast of finite and infinite in one verse, please.
Well, in one verse, that's an interesting question. Maybe that's the issue. One verse shows both. I think maybe that's why it's special.
But it's even further. It actually, when you look at the commentary, the whole Tichur Isi case is talking about a finite reality.
Right, I get it.
The Mitzvos is talking about an infinite reality.
I get it.
Can you have other verses? Of course you can. I'm sure you could find places like he said, Arucha me'eretz mida rechava miniyam. About Torah, he brought before a verse.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that.
Yeah, but
Go
that's
ahead.
only one half of the verse. That's not the whole
I
thing.
get it. You answered well. It's hard to find a one pasuk that contains both perspectives.
And
I
even
get
if you
it.
found one, that would be like a question like saying, so why does he bring one and not the other?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can be mafalpal in that if you like.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you for answering that. That was helpful.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Just sort of I don't know the history of the Torah here. The Ibn Ezra lived in the 11th century. Um, I don't know if you can call someone that living in that far back as like a makubal. I mean, we know the Ramban Nachmanides was sort of a precursor. He certainly had kind of a kabbalistic or ethereal way of looking at reality. But do we know that the Ibn Ezra had any
Not
sort of
necessarily. And Rashi too, you could say the same thing about Rashi. Rashi or the Ibn Ezra or the Mitzudas David that he brought, not necessarily they have to have any Kabbalistic, but they're Torah giants. It's one
Yes,
Torah.
of course. I was just curious to know. We, it just seems like the Ramban Nachmanides has more of a I don't know kind of
Ramban
kabbalistic.
is a
Yeah.
known Makubal, a
Uh,
known Kabbalist, and in his
right,
commentaries, he brings Kabbalah. Absolutely.
but not necessarily the Ibn Ezra. That's why I'm asking.
Now, I don't. I have to research it, but I don't recall Ibn Ezra necessarily being associated strictly with Kabbalah. Did he know Kabbalah? Most likely, yes. Does he write about it? I don't know because there are quite a few that knew it, but they didn't include it in their commentaries.
Hmm.
Like
Got
in
it.
Rashi, there's the Shalah writes that in Rashi you'll find Nifloya Shabbatera. Dvarim, what is the word he uses? Dvarim Nifloim. And the Rebbe often says that means primis Torah, but it's
Uh-huh.
hinted to. It's not
I see.
directly. You're not going to find him saying directly. The Rambam, there's a disagreement about that, whether he was a Makubal or maybe in his last days, or he was, but he didn't reveal it. It's a longer discussion. But
Okay.
regardless, even if they have nothing, if you can't find Kabbalah, Chassidus does this all the time. It takes a pasuk, it can take the verses and commentary, and then it gives the primis haTorah explanation of it, that in it, and uses the commentaries to explain it al pi Chassidus. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay.
That was
Good.
very good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna look it up in the Samach Tzedek because he talks about this. Just for the record, this whole piece about L'chol Tichla is based on the Samach Tzedek. If you look in the footnotes, you'll see footnote number
An oratora.
in footnote number 39 Vayechulu, and he brings it as well, which I will look up later. I'll look it up later. I was looking at Maimer of the Friedeker Rebbe. I don't see it right now. I don't think it's here. Okay. I wanted to learn this Maimer inside with you, but we'll do that afterwards. And just the whole subject matter. Okay. So let's continue. Now he's going to conclude the Maimer. Remember, the Maimer started with Shuva Yisrael Ad Havai Lekacha. He asked, what does that mean, Ad? So now, based on the Ad V'Loyad and the Ad V'Ad that we discussed, he's going to explain the beginning of the Maimer, where he asked that initial question. Ma'u inyan Ad Havai Lekacha. It should have said, Le Hashem Lekach, to God. What's Ad? So now we're going to learn the last paragraph of this Maimer. Bottom of page 33. So unless there are any other questions, I'm going to continue here. Okay. So he says like this now. So if you recall, the Maimorim of Samach Vav, like Ayin Beis, were written one long flow, but then the Rebbe Rasha broke them into individual discourses, Maimarim, which he then delivered in its respective time. This is a Maimar from Shabbos Shuvah, as we began in the Maimar, page 24, and now he's concluding what he began with in the beginning of the Maimar. He says, "V'zeu Shuvi Yisrael ad Havaya Lekecha," and now we'll understand why the pasuk uses the word ad, and not lehavaya Lekecha. The Teshuva tzarich liyis, Teshuva has to be done in a manner sheyagia b'bchinas ad v'lo yad b'chlal. Teshuva is a leap. Teshuva is not the regular progression, step by step. That's avodah b'seder v'adroga, it's called. An orderly progression of one level after another level, and so on. Teshuva requires a leap, as he's going to explain. Ad v'lo yad b'chlal. That it's ad, but not including the next level. It's including, but not further. Dihine yedua, as it's known, and now it's as it's known. The slichas avenis, the forgiveness of sins, of transgressions, iniquities, hu dafka me'ein Ein Sof shalamayla m'seder ishtalshlus. To forgive a transgression, to forgive well, I'm looking for the right words, something that defied the structure of how God created existence, you have to go beyond the structure. Like the famous rule in science, you can't solve a problem from the same system where the problem was created. So you have to go shalamayla m'seder ishtalshlus. Because in Seder Shtalshlus there, Shaykh HaPagam, Pagam is like an injury or a wound. So think of it this way. It's a good opportunity to explain. When people think of mitzvahs and averis as commandments and sins, it's much deeper than that. We talk of mitzvahs from the word connection. Tzafsa v'chibur. And avera comes from the word displacement, disalignment, a misalignment. So a mitzvah aligns things, and avera misaligns things. What does that mean? Let's talk in terms of physical health. When a person is healthy, everything is aligned. The arteries, the veins, the blood is flowing smoothly, circulating properly. Same thing in the muscle structure, the nervous system. The entire body, everything is fluidly flowing. God forbid, what is a disease? What is illness? What's a pagam, an injury? What does it cause? It causes some type of either blockage or some severing that doesn't allow the flow to properly flow smoothly. So a mitzvah means you're aligning your life to the way God planned your life. So your structure, your life is your body and your soul. When you do a mitzvah, you're aligning it, you're nourishing it with healthy spiritual food and healthy spiritual exercise. So it becomes healthier, more aligned, more connected. God forbid, when a person does a sin, what they're doing is they're disconnecting. They're creating a disconnection, a displacement, a type of gullus. And that displacement creates a spiritual form, a spiritual toxin, a spiritual infection, a spiritual wound. Teshuva repairs. But to repair something, you can't just go back to where it was the day before, because now there's been damage done. You need to repair the damage. And that's what he's coming to explain. Therefore, you have to go to a place that's deeper and higher that can help you repair the pagam. Because in the ishtalshlus, there's now a pagam. There's a wound. So how do you heal someone who's not healthy? So yes, there's a natural immunity, the natural healing system and so on. But let's, for argument's sake, there are many things that you need help. You need a doctor, you need medication, you need surgery. Not you, anyone, God forbid. But the person may need some intervention that's more than just the regular healing process. In order for there to be the milui hapgamim, It means the repair. Mili literally means to fill the void, the pagam, the severing, the cut that happened. In order to fill that and to heal it, that requires accessing an Ohr Ein Sof, a level of Ohr Ein Sof that's higher than Ishtalshlus. So that can come and help repair the wound or the injury. And how do we achieve that? How do we access that level? And this level of Ohr Ein Sof before the Shtalshlus, we draw down through tshuva from the depths of the heart, dafka. You know, it's not just a superficial tshuva. It has to come from the depths of the heart. To you, my heart speaks. Bakshu ponai. Es panecha avaya vakish. Bakshu ponai. There's a different interpretation of what that means. Bottom line is, it's requesting your face. I want to have the panecha of avaya I am asking for. Why panecha avaya? Because you need a pnimius dika, deeper level of revelation. B'chdei lahamshich. B'chinas pnimius v'atzmus Ohr Ein Sof. Ze'al yidei bakshu ponai. That's by my faith, my insides are requesting that in turn is mamshich the pnimius of avaya. So in order to be mamshich the pnimius of atzmus Ein Sof, that's dafka bakshu ponai, which means emek u pnimius alev. B'chinas emek u pnimius alev. So my innermost, ponai means face, but it also means innermost part of my heart is reaching to you. L'cham libi, I speak to you from the innermost parts of my heart. That in turn draws down the panimius atzmus Ohr Ein Sof, which is lifnei, which is higher than ishtalshlus. Shezeh dafka me'er ramamshich b'chinas pnimius v'atzmus Ohr Ein Sof. So it's dafka the emek and pnimius alev tshuva me'umke deliba. When it's coming, like when a person is really in a state of deep awakening, and is from the depths of their heart, that it's able to reach and pierce levels that are higher than Seder Shtalshlus. And that is Mamshech Primis and Atzmus Ohr Ein Sof. So now he explains why it says Ad. V'zeu shuv Yisrael ad avay lekecha. That's why the pasuk says the word Ad. Shetagia tshuva dafka b'chinas ad v'lo yad b'chlal. The Ad is saying, Ad v'lo yad b'chlal, I want to reach a place that is beyond the levels of Ishtalshlus. Shezeh b'chinas Ohr Ein Sof haseviv. This is the transcendent, infinite light, higher than Mamala of Seder Ishtalshlus. Then he's going to continue the rest of the pasuk. But let me stop if anybody wants to ask anything about that. There's more to come here. I probably would wait to see the whole picture, but still, any questions? So you have to say, Ad Avay Lekecha means that Shuv Yisrael, the Teshuva, is reaching the Avay Lekecha, the Pnimius of Avay Lekecha, which is Ad V'lo Yad B'chlal. That's what the Ad is hinting to.
I mean, I think you explained it very well in terms of making a leap that is above the Seder Hishtalshelus, that's into the bleak bowl, which is Ad below Ad. So you can't say, and you obviously you try to reach to Atmos, but that's the paradox. If you want to reach high, you have to reach at a level where you actually can't reach Atmos, but you can reach higher than within the finite realm. That's how I see it.
Yeah, that's correct. That is exactly what it is. He says it explicitly. Yeah, reaching a level of the L'mayla Mishtashtalshus.
Are you taking questions now, or are you continuing?
Go ahead if you have a question, please.
I certainly understand it in a poetic sense, like when it says to reach the depths of your heart, the umtku deliba. I mean, I get that. You know, your tshuva should be very earnest and very deep, and with all, I guess I would have said b'chol me'odecha. because we learned about what that is in terms of Mesiras Nefesh and reaching to the source of the root of your neshama, which is above this Ederishtalshus. I mean, all that makes sense to me. But to say you have to do tshuva with the liba, the depths of your heart. Man, what about the depths of my brain? I mean, if I really want to fix what I did wrong, I should really think really long and hard about, what I did wrong and how I messed up and how am I going to fix it. And you can say, well, that is, I'm just saying, why the depths of the heart? Why not the depths of the brain?
Because this isn't a cognitive or intellectual experience. This is one if you hurt someone you love and you tell them, I went to the depths of my brain, and they don't hear from you from your heart a resonating sense of regret or a resonating sense that you've really learned your lesson, I would say, yes, you're very nice. It's become very philosophical for you. This whole thing is an emotional relationship that we're talking about. The Jews, for example, they built a golden calf. And it was not enough for Moshe to come to Hashem and say, hey, I've done a tremendous amount of soul searching and introspection, all on an intellectual level. It all comes down to, you want my relationship. A relationship is a heartfelt relationship. You want my heart, I need your heart. So to me, that's the obvious reason. That's what tshuva is. It's a relationship.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Now, does that mean that tshuva you shouldn't contemplate? Now, obviously, if you're going to do tshuva properly, contemplating on it and using your mind as much as you can to try to see what you did wrong or what you can do better, etc., by all means, is part of the process. But the heart of it, no pun intended, is the return of the heart.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi. That was special. Yeah. Appreciate that.
Okay. Then the pasuk continues. Ki chashalta ba'avinecha. Shuv Yisrael ad avai lekecha ki chashalta. Chashalta means gestreichelt in Yiddish, because you stumbled. Ba'avinecha, with your sins. Calls it stumbling. Tihine. Because now, gamas ha'elam nosan biliboy. Next page, 34. There's a pasuk that says that the world was given into each one of our hearts. It's one of the sources for the idea of the microcosm, that each one of us includes the entire universe within our hearts. Esa'elam nosan biliboy. Biliboy shalodam, in the heart of the person. Which really means that when you do something that corrects in your own heart something, it doesn't just correct it within you, it corrects it in the entire world. Let's see how he explains it. In order to draw down revelation of the divine in existence, yeah, exactly. How do we do that? Someone will say, I want to reveal God in the world. It begins with you. It's through the person first bringing godliness, Ohr Ein Sof, on his nefesh, through Torah Mitzvos. So again, microcosm, macrocosm. You do that in turn has an impact on a macrocosmic level. Through that, he also then draws the Gilui also into the world around him. In his Bar, and it was explained earlier, I see in the first mimer, the Ikra Kavana B'Maisa Mitzvos, that the primary intention in the action of mitzvahs, if you recall, that was the purpose of existence, is to draw down Ohr Ein Sof in this world. When he spoke about what's the Tachlis Abriya, what's the purpose of creation, to bring down Ohr Ein Sof, not just Ohr HaGvul, Ohr Ein Sof into the world. Why? Because the Nesav HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because God desired to have what? Liyasloi dira b'tachtenim. Wants to have a dira b'tachtenim. How do we do that? Through the Maisa mitzvahs in this world. Ulezeis kasher chashalta b'aveinecha. And thus, when someone stumbles, and in some way slips or stumbles, b'aveinecha, in your sins, we'll call it iniquities, or what I said before, displacements, the loy nishlema hakavana. What does that do? It's going the other direction. Instead of bringing the divine into existence, like I mentioned, in a healthy structured and balanced way, you're actually creating a disconnect. So the kavanah is not being fulfilled. So what do you have to do now? Like we said before, you have to then be mamshech Ohr Ein Sof al yedei Teshuva. So that person has to do tshuva, because just as they are the ones that so-called severed or disconnected, they have to now reconnect, but it has to come from a deeper place. Upirish ki chashalta. In other words, that's the key. Shuv Yisrael avaycha ki chashalta bevenecha. Because he stumbled, he says, ki chashalta hu sha'idei zehu nichshel v'nefo rachmana litzlan. Because through the sins, he has stumbled and fallen, God forbid. No, but something is not in order here. When a person is walking smoothly, everything is in order. The sins have caused a fall. They've caused him to slip and fall, to stumble and fall. And just as on the positive side, also on the negative side, this also causes microcosm, macrocosm, a yurida in the entire world as well. Because the souls coming down below is only for this purpose. To do what? That's why the neshama came down in the first place, to draw down the infinite divine light in the worlds. Because the soul is also rooted in Atzmos Ohr Ein Sof. That's why it has the power to draw down. But so why does it come down? Not for the neshama itself, but in order to bring it down into the world. And that's why the soul came down dafke, deliberately, specifically, explicitly, in a physical body, as it's known and explained elsewhere. I'm just looking at the sources. Ukamation is barley ill, and as was explained earlier, he says page 30. They read page 30 about B'teira, shehi mushreshes ba'atzmos. Why does it say 30? I think it should be 32, to be honest. I think it should say 32, not 30, because in 30 it doesn't talk about Torah yet. Unless I'm missing something. One second, let me see quickly. No. It should say page 32, which we reviewed. There's yesterday's class. So just like the Torah is the neshamas are rooted in atzmos, like we learned earlier about Torah. Umeshum zeh nitna dafka lamata, and that's why it was given dafka lamata. Because if the Torah was not rooted there, then higher levels in Giluyim have higher levels of Torah, like the Kav, higher levels of Giluyim. But since it's rooted in atzmos, which is higher than all the Giluyim, is given dafka lamata, kamoy kain hu b'neshamas gam kain. So like we said about Torah, that was given dafka lamata, the neshamas that are rooted in atzmos also come down dafka lamata, which is where the atzmos desire to have a dir b'tachtenim. Ulechein b'yichelis ha-neshamas dafka lahamshe b'chinas atzmos Ohr Ein Sof. And that's why neshamas, in this case we're talking about through Teshuva, that's where they have the power to draw down from atzmos Ohr Ein Sof. If they were not rooted there, they couldn't draw from there. She'ein ze b'yichelis ha-malachim. This is not the capacity of the angels, and not on all the higher levels of ishtalshus. They cannot achieve that because they're not rooted in atzmos. They originate from atzmos, but they don't have atzmisdika powers. Their powers are from the reflection of the divine. I just want to stop for a moment and just explain. It sounds to me, he doesn't spell it out exactly, because it's rooted in atzmos, he's saying that's why it comes down lamata. Does that mean because it's rooted in atzmos and atzmos nesava has a desire to have a dir b'tachteim, that's why it comes down lamata? Or does it mean because it's rooted so high, the only place you can experience it is all the way in the lowest levels? Because in Giluyim, you're only going to get reflections. It could be both reasons. I just spelling it out because reading it, like it's like missing a certain, seems to be missing a certain line. So why indeed? Just because it's rooted in Atzmus, why does it come down Dafka Lamata? So I think it's for these both reasons, and they're probably interconnected, frankly. I just want to see what he said.
I mean, it makes sense. If you want to draw down.
One second. Yeah, that's what I'll stick with right now for now. Yeah.
I was just going to say it makes sense. If you want to draw down the Ohr Ein Sof, you have to have an agent that partakes of that level. It's like
that's not what I was asking.
No,
that we understand. In order to draw Ohr Ein Sof, you need the neshamas that are rooted in Ohr Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, before ishtalshlus.
So what's your question?
It's all right. If you didn't get it, it's fine. You can listen to it later. I was talking about something else. Why is dafka lamata? Because it's rooted in atzmus. Why does it come down dafka lamata? That's what I was coming to explain.
I see. And what was your answer you're going with?
I gave two explanations. One, because nesava, because atzmus wants a dafka lamata, and secondly, because the giluyim are not a keli for atzmus. It's dafka lamata that's a keli. In other words, an etzem can only be revealed in a place that is completely outside of giluyim.
Sounds like Basi Lagani there, but I think you're right.
Okay. Let me see here. Let's see how much more I can go here. Okay, bottom line, so it's dafka the neshamas that are rooted there, that they can bring down Mitzvos and Sof, not in Malachim, and not all the levels in the higher levels of Ishtalshus. I'm going to read as much as I can here. I don't want to leave it hanging. Like he said, and being that this is the ultimate purpose of an neshama lamata, to do what? To be mamshech Ohr Ein Sof dafka lamata. Lezeis meheder hamshacha now. So now when it doesn't do that, the neshama's very purpose has been compromised. When it's lacking this hamshacha, it's not just a side fact. It's not just a incidental. That means so that's why chishalto, the person nichshal, he's stumbled, v'nefel madregose, and he falls from his level because he's not fulfilling his purpose. It's like someone sends you on a mission, and not only have you not fulfilled the mission, you actually have compromised the mission. So that's a fall. And as a result, he also affects a Yerida in the world around him. Because you could argue, seemingly, that the Geluyim of the Elamis is nothing to do with our Avodah. It has to do with the Kav. God sent a ray of energy, as we learned, into existence, al pisei de ishtalshlus. Why suddenly we're saying that the world is affected by our sin and our injury or our wound or our stumbling? Why is it affecting the world? So that's what he's taking us back to the beginning, the first line on top, because the whole world was created for us and placed in our heart. In other words, we control the destiny of the world. It's not two separate things. It is true, yes, God sent energy and created the world. But once a human being comes into the world is now dependent on us. Both ways. Either to elevate it and fulfill its purpose, or God forbid the opposite. So it's an interesting line here that he adds. So that's why your personal behavior affects the entire world. And what is the intention? To be mamshech Ohr Ein Sof, not just in your life, but in the world. And that's why when a person draws down Ohr Ein Sof through the performance of mitzvah, Torah mitzvahs, he causes aliyah b'chol ha'elamis. He causes an elevation, not just in the person, but in all of existence, in all the worlds. And the opposite is also true, God forbid. Nasa yirida chaz v'shalom. God forbid a yirida causes a descent He degrades b'chol ha'elamis in all the world. So kamoy b'chet tzadas b'frat. And like with the chet tzadas specifically, because that was the first chet that led to all others, that Adam and Chava, they sinned in the Garden of Eden. Kamoy kenu b'kol chet v'oven b'frat. So too it is with every sin and every iniquity and every transgression in detail, specifically. And the tikkun now is to tshuva from the depths of the heart, because that's accessing so-called the depths of Ohr Ein Sof. Like we speak about mamakim karasicha, or we speak mina meitzer karasika, anani b'merchavka. These are verses he used in the first mimer in Samach Vav. And that fills or repairs all the wounds and injuries, all the vacuums, if you wish. Pagam also can mean a crack, like a pagam. Nesan tam pagam. A pagam is like a split. Something is broken. So this fills and repairs all the breaks. And that's why it says adavaya, because you're accessing Ohr Ein Sof that's beyond the finite existence. That's Atzmus Ein Sof, the transcendent, the bligvul. And through that we draw down forgiveness and what's another word for forgiveness? Forgiveness and forgiveness. They're both forgiveness. They're different levels of forgiveness.
Healing.
Yeah, healing is the general word. Correct. Yeah. Okay. That concludes Mimer number 3 in Hemshech Samach Vav. Okay. That's a very, I find a very fundamental piece here about the Rebbe Rashab is really, in a few places in this Mimer, where he describes, say, the Shtalshlus, the finite structure, now how he describes our avodah, and also, God forbid, the lack of thereof, is very, I think, very fundamental. So if you're marking notes, this is a good thing to return to if you ever want to have a summation of how we affect the world around us, positively and, God forbid, also negatively. Just thought it was a very succinct and powerful description of that. So I'll stop here. Any questions? Okay. So we finished the Mimer. We're page 34.